Hello, my name is Catherine and I'm the Director within the Business of Data team here at Crinium, and it is a pleasure to have you joining us today. Driven by our global connected network, Crinium inspires data and analytics senior leaders to drive efficiency and innovation and follow proven paths to success. The Business of Data show is just one of the formats where we showcase thought-leading insights from senior data analytics executives. In each episode, we'll discuss the latest industry news and research and explore the hottest topics, challenges and opportunities from around the world. On that note, we'd love to hear from you. If you have thoughts, questions or topics that you'd like us to cover in future episodes, please do email them over to bod@criniumgroup.com. It's becoming increasingly clear that the future of business is in the cloud. When we polled 100 executives from the US and Europe's largest financial service companies earlier this year, 94% reported that their companies are deploying models in cloud-based environments. A separate survey of 100 US-based data analytics leaders found that 98% accelerated their cloud migration plans in 2020. Today, we'll be looking at what's driving these business transformations, the challenges they'll encounter when moving to the cloud, and how executives can ensure their cloud migration projects are successful. Our first guest joining me in the studio is Samra, Director of Data Governance and Quality at Liberty Global. Dee was our first ever guest on the Business of Data podcast, and I'm so glad she was able to join us again for the show. Welcome, Dee.
Hi, Catherine. Thank you for having me.
No worries at all. Absolute pleasure. So we're talking all about cloud, and I know obviously you're going to be bringing the data governance aspect to that. So my first question to you today is, how would you describe the current state of play in enterprise cloud migration? It seems that recent events have accelerated these migrations in many companies. Do you think that's fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I think most organizations had a cloud strategy, but certainly the pandemic has accelerated those efforts, the need for being able to do things more remotely. But also, cloud can be a lot easier for sort of green space, new organizations, those startups and ventures. They can jump wholeheartedly and start their data landscape in the cloud. But for larger organizations, it's a much bigger consideration. A lot more planning needs to go into that, looking at what you've currently got on premise and how to migrate that and do it in sort of a strategic way, but with the right governance and the right guardrails around that has been kind of something that's probably slowed people down, especially the security aspect. But I think the cloud providers have certainly stepped up in that space. So people are less scared of going in the cloud and are really driving those strategies forward. And like I said, with the pandemic, it's pushed that even accelerated that effort. It's quicker to do analytics in the cloud, right? If your data's available up there. So with the need for quick changes in advertising, marketing, and things like that. So, as lockdowns stop, different things happening so quickly, where organizations are having to react to that just as quickly. And cloud enabled.
Absolutely. I think that's really interesting what you said there at the beginning, that there's almost been a context change around the cloud in people's feelings and fears. It wasn't too many years ago that we were worried about the security of the cloud and, is it right? Where actually now it's pivoted, and for many of us working from home and many enterprises that still find themselves working from home, actually the cloud presents a far more secure nature than being on-prem. So you mentioned there that people were on the start of their journey to this transformation. Where was Liberty Global prior to the pandemic, and where are they now in terms of that migration?
So I think it would be accurate to say we're still in hybrid situation, but certainly we stood up a data governance center of excellence. So just making sure, like I said before, that like all other organizations, that when we're moving to the cloud, that you do that due diligence. That's especially for larger corporations. There's so many different aspects to consider. for us, for example, Liberty Global is a central organisation. We have many opcos across the European landscape, each potentially having different use cases for going into the cloud. So we need to consider all of those things and making sure that the right parties are brought together to be part of that conversation and strategy of how we go to the cloud with which data sets and what capability we're trying to leverage and enable up there. Like many other organizations, we're still in that hybrid state because we have a long history of on-premise legacy, but certainly headed in the cloud direction.
Absolutely. And as you touched upon, the business requirement for flexibility as we go into lockdown, out of lockdown, and being able to transition and be flexible is just a business need at the moment. So what would you say to executives who are currently feeling pressure to almost copy-paste into the cloud rather than doing what you're suggesting, which is a far more strategic approach and really understanding the needs and requirements? What would you suggest to arm them with to go back to those executives who are feeling that pressure to move very quick and do that copy-paste method?
So I think the key thing is to always remember why. What is your why? Why are you moving to the cloud? What capability are you wanting to leverage? But also appreciating what your approach is, whether you are going multi-cloud, single cloud strategy, private cloud, what the considerations for that are. If you're using a lot of organizations have a lot of personal data, they need to consider, do they want that in the cloud or not? Are they using it more for analytics? Is it, so I think the use case is really key, that you gather those requirements and understand what it is that you're trying to leverage from using cloud environments in the first place and sticking to that rather than sort of saying, yeah, we're going to be full cloud. But what are you trying to drive? If it's cost efficiencies from having that distributed infra in the cloud that can be accessed remotely, then we need to make sure that you're doing it in the right way, right? Making sure that you're not overlapping. If you're going multi-cloud, that you're not putting the same data sets in both cloud environments, so that you're not overlapping capability between the cloud environments, for sure. So again, it's just about that forethought, that planning, having a cloud data strategy that is aligned to your requirements as a business and your objectives and why you're actually going into the cloud in the first place.
I love that. That's fantastic. Knowing your why, I think that's so important. And I think in times of disturbance where we're in the pandemic at the moment and so much is going on, I think companies and executive boards, you can end up losing your why behind what you're meant to be doing, because there is that stress to move so quickly. But as you say, grounding yourself in what that why is can really help. Now, you mentioned there about flexibility and resilience, but what other benefits does migrating data, apps and services to the cloud unlock?
It's that agility, right? So you've got your DevOps type of capability that you try to build within your business. Certainly, a lot of large organizations really want to be able to have that cyclic release of newer capability that's that every 6 weeks you're going to put out an update or an improvement on your products or services, and being able to do that in a quick way and really adding that value to your end customer as quickly as you possibly can in all competitive markets, I would expect. But it's the ability to spin up and spin down those environments that you need to leverage for your data science community, but also being able to run proof of concepts very quickly. If you were waiting for on-premise infrastructure to be stood up, it just takes that whole noise away and that lead time that's required there. So cloud really, again, it's back to that agility to get to your analytics. And like I said, the distributed infra means that you can share your data more quickly to more remote areas, especially for large organizations like ours, where you're in multi-country, so across a different geographical landscape. So it's a whole host of benefits that organizations are trying to leverage right now. But also, I think what's key is that the vendors of all of these, leading technologies and advancements in technological capability are also, leveraging the cloud, right? So it's of benefit to them. It's quicker and easier to install or deploy new applications or tool sets. There's so many benefits to moving to cloud.
Absolutely. It certainly seems that it is certainly an environment where there's lots of positives as well. Now, I asked you a question there about how to avoid that copy-paste pressure. But for executives that have never done it before, overseeing an enterprise's cloud migration can be challenging. In your experience, what have been the key stumbling blocks that you've gone through?
I think it's I'm sure it's the same for many organizations, but it's just making sure that you've got the right people involved. So certainly from a provisioning perspective, you need to ensure that you've got your security, you've got your privacy, data governance engaged, but also from a budget forecasting point of view, you need to have the right rigor around those processes to make sure you don't end up overspending where you hadn't expected it. Yes, I think key is really having the right parties involved and knowing like I said, the why and those use cases, so that you are sticking to this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it. So and you don't get distracted with all the the nice to haves on top, right? But really meeting the objective is the core focus. So I think don't get distracted and stick to your objective, I guess, and engage the right parties to enable it to happen. So we have a centre of excellence that I mentioned before, where we've got the sort of key governance layer over the top that are all engaged, but then you've got all the other sort of delivery parties involved, from operations, IT to the business, and the DevOps teams, of course.
Fantastic. Now, Dee, just to touch on that as my final question, given the journey you've been on to establish data governance on premise, how do you see this being extended into the cloud?
Yeah, so again, coming back to that, knowing your strategy, are you going multi-cloud, are you going single cloud, public, private, all of those things. Once you've established those key elements of your data strategy, you need to ensure that whatever you do is going to be done in a governed way. So, where we have data governance on premise, having that full catalogue of knowing what data do I have and where is it, really has to extend then into the cloud. And how you do that is going to be key, right? Because again, there's key things to consider there from a data governance strategy point of view of do I want to go cloud native governance, which case if I'm in a multi-cloud environment, you're going to have something native to say AWS versus GCP versus Azure, and then how do I bring that metadata back together? And obviously there's costs involved of moving data on and off cloud, and certainly between clouds. So all of these things need to be considered when you're agreeing how you're going to move forward from a data governance perspective. So it's that centralized view versus federated, cloud native tooling, or something that would actually work with all of the different cloud providers. And there's a lot of options there, right? So I think data governance for sure is more of there's a lot of tooling that's come out in recent years, and that's kind of happened in parallel to cloud coming around. So I think there's most of the data governance toolings for sure are quite cloud ready. That's not to say that the cloud providers aren't also stepping up in that space, but you just need to really think about, do you want to be locked in with a particular cloud provider for all of their tooling, capabilities, applications, including data governance, or are you looking to keep a lot of that capability cloud agnostic? But yeah, so
lots to be thinking about for certainty. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
No problem. Thank you again for having me, Catherine. See you soon.
Now it's time to head over to South Africa, where my colleague Craig Stewart will be joined by another guest to continue this brilliant conversation surrounding the cloud. Over to you, Craig.
Thanks, Catherine. Really valuable insights there from Dee around cloud technology and strategies at Liberty Global. Joining me here in Johannesburg to share Nedbank's story of their cloud migration project, which is one of the largest in Africa, is Brenda May. Brenda is currently an independent consultant assisting large-scale organizations, predominantly banks, in accelerating their cloud journeys. Brenda, thanks so much for joining me in studio. How are you doing?
Thanks, Craig. Very good to meet you. I'm well.
Yeah, good to hear. So let's dive right into it, Brenda. How would you describe the current state of play of enterprise cloud migrations? And has the current sort of state of the economy, the world, etc., accelerated this digital transformation?
Craig, I'm very divided on that answer. I'll have to explain why. I do believe there's a very, very clear acknowledgement that not having a cloud strategy or journey puts you at a strategic disadvantage. I feel that in the enterprise, though, that the message that comes out of the strategy guys and what lands on the ground is very divided. I also feel that what we're seeing in the media, Twitter, LinkedIn, published media, etc., all extols the look at this big guy, they've just gone all in, these guys have just signed with this guy, this service has just gone live for this enterprise in the cloud. I feel that's slightly misleading on the journeys of the various organizations, and I feel that match between where the strategy is set and where the journey is going and where these companies are actually finding themselves is very, very mixed. Do I feel that the pandemic has accelerated? Absolutely, but so the strategy is clear, we're going there, we've got a journey, it's going to enable our digital transformation, and then you've got this operational team that are sitting there having to pull back on every single little cost. I don't believe that on the South African market space we've had the time for that to settle, and we're still watching operational teams save 10 Rand here, 20 Rand there, a few $1,000s there, a few $1,000s there, and we have this strategy that is quite a costly strategy. To really commit to that strategy is quite costly. I then probably also have a slightly more controversial one, and it's actually bad for me too, and that's that, look at who's leading or holding fort for the enterprises now. It's all our baby boomers. Even the Gen Xers, it's me, we are not digitally native.
Yeah.
We're immigrants. We still find extreme comfort in print media and other face-to-face things. We are comfortable with non-digital interactions. We actually need to understand that true digital transformation comes from those Gen Zs, those millennials, those people who only feel comfort as a first pass in a digital interaction versus the Gen Xers, and the baby boomers. So I do think it's strategically very clear you're at a disadvantage, but actually making it really happen with all these challenges around us don't think is going to be easy at all.
Yeah, and Nedbank has really made it happen, and you're sort of on that journey around cloud and sort of having this one of the largest cloud migrations in Africa. Talk to me a little bit about that. Let's kind of dig into how that was such a core part of the digital transformation of the bank.
So, in my experience, so me coming in to help them accelerate their journey, they had started their journey off very much on a lift and shift business case. Contributing to that lift and shift business cases, a few years down the line, they then added a very strategic, we will go native, we will drive a cloud native outcome for strategic projects. For some of the portfolios, going very well. The lift and shift program is tracking along incredibly well, and some of the insights this organization has given themselves have actually come out of their learnings in the lift and shift. So it is true that I don't think lift and shift can be your primary business case. Obviously, that's not the case if you're data center exiting. That's clearly a different story. But if you're not immediately data center exiting, you get all the learnings out of that. Their strategic journey, I think, probably kicked off in earnest a year, 18 months ago, where they were then saying we are going to take these native programs in, we are going to make sure everything delivers off a pipeline, we're going to combine this together with our agile enablement. So that's gone particularly well. I think that Nedbank have a very, very, very strong advantage in that their execution capability is very strong. Having been exposed to some of the other banking organizations in South Africa, I do feel that their execution doesn't sit at the intensity that Nedbank's, and that might be their magic. That may be why they are sitting with the highest level of migration into the cloud on the continent. And that execution has come with learnings, which has had its pains, but they're pushing through those obstacle boundaries very, very well.
Yeah, it's a great segue into the last question that I want to ask you and dig into is, what are some of the big obstacles companies, large organizations, executives face as they migrate, the majority of their business to the cloud?
my first comment to anyone is commit. Don't pretend you're committing. Don't be the Gen X or the baby boomer taking one foot and putting it into another land and just pretending you're going to go. Then maybe you're not pretending, maybe you really mean to go. But we all know what happens. As soon as you get nervous, what do? You revert back to what you've always known and what's made you successful and what's made you famous. So be very, very careful about that. You commit. Also, someone else can't make your plan for you. That plan is yours. You need your skin in it. You need to drive that plan. That is so, so important. I think the other thing I'd like to just share is that multi-cloud magic, you're not Harry Potter. And don't try and be. You can't focus a massive journey on 2 cloud providers in a single instant. You can add one later, but you have to take these teams who found their space in infrastructure. They've been defined by the way infrastructure is built by certain vendors, and now you're taking that all away, you're pulling the wool out under them or the carpet out under them, and you're giving them this code and they're trying to find their space. Those teams cannot focus on 2. The CSPs are quite normalized in a lot of perspectives, but not totally. So you really, really have to be careful about this, the marketing brand about multi-cloud.
Yeah.
The other thing I think I see quite well on the obstacles, actually, it's probably a positive first, but it's an obstacle until you realize it, and you actually only realize it until your CFO actually says, ring, ding-a-ling, there's a problem going on here, and that's that the costs can get out of hand. And while the optimization efforts shows you the true benefit of driving down costs and optimizing and having the scale, be very focused on it. Be extremely, extremely focused on it. On that little one, the one thing, and this is a positive actually, not necessarily an obstacle, that I've noticed happens to everybody is everyone says cloud is cheaper, cloud is cheaper, cloud is cheaper. You do the business case and you don't take into account, or no, you estimate your business cases. I do believe that what we've witnessed operationally is that as soon as you dig into your costs, you get a big fright. You think cloud's not for you. You think, oh, should I be pulling back because this is expensive? But then you get into that true optimization. And it is true. The flex is there. The costs can be managed. You can drop stuff when you don't need it. It's actually really been good. So it's probably a little bit of a bittersweet. It's great when you get it right, but getting there is going to make you awfully scared.
Yeah, and I guess the benefit there is also the speed to insights. You know, how you can really change your business based on the analytics and the insights that you're getting, because now you're in the cloud and it's scalable and it's fast. So the cost of the actual infrastructure might be quite high, but the payoff down the line should be pretty good, right?
You're so right, and I actually didn't even think about that. But you know, the one thing is, when you said that to me, is that the natural home of people that start the journey, so let's just take infrastructure, really does often start people's journey. Their natural home is not in data. And you know, it would be very good if people went and took some data expertise and dropped them, parachute them into these teams that start the journey, because that is how you're going to drive that understanding. There is data for days on this journey. But what do you do with it, and how do you make it do something more meaningful? I do believe the finance guys get it first, but that's because they're very focused on lots of columns, rows, etc., and they don't mind calculations and Excel. But you have to actually know what to do with it. And it'd probably be good advice to say that people should commit to a data analyst, engineer. I don't necessarily say you need a scientist for it, but you do need someone that helps those teams understand the data they have at their fingertips.
Perfect. Brenda, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your insights and the story. I quite like the tip there of just commit. Kind of reminds me of my golf swing. Just go and commit and get it done. All right, so that's it from South Africa today. Back to you in studio in Bristol.
There we go. What a brilliant episode. Thank you again to our thought leaders for their fantastic contributions. Now, you may remember at the start of this episode, I referenced a few statistics all about the cloud. To dive deeper into those, do head over to thebusinessofdata.com, where you'll find a report and you can find out lots more. Next time, we'll be talking all about data and analytics, talent and community. Just as we have done this time, we'll be joined by expert thought leaders to help us dive deep into the challenges and opportunities. Do be sure to subscribe to the Business of Data YouTube channel, follow our page on LinkedIn, and visit our content platform for more great content, insights and connections. Stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you next time.